All right, good evening. Welcome to church. We're just going to come to you out of left field or right field or whichever way it looks to you from where you're at. We're over here. So let's sing a couple verses of May the Mind of Christ my Savior, and then that little chorus, All I Ever Want to Be.
My Savior, live in me from day to day. By His love and power control me, all I do and say. May the word of God dwell richly in my heart from now to now, so that all may see I triumph, holding through His love. May the love of Jesus fill me as the waters fill the sea. Him exalting, self-abasing, this is victory. All I ever want to be is what you want of me. I give my life to you, all my hopes and dreams and plans I place within your hands, and give my life to you. Here I am, Lord, use me. Take my life and mold me. All I ever want to be is what you want of me. I give my life to you, all my hopes and dreams and plans I place within your hands, and give my life to you.
Good singing, Pastor.
All right, if you're wondering what's different in here, then we have the stage back set up. And so it does look a little bit different, doesn't it? It makes it look a little bit smaller, but in preparation for Krista and Joey's wedding this weekend, we're trying to get things started moving in that direction. And so I hope that you'll pray for them as they approach their big day. And so that's why we have the full stage. When COVID hit and we had people start coming back and we needed room, we ended up taking down most of our stage and putting the musicians on the floor and putting extra chairs up here and that type of thing. And so, but we want to welcome you to our Wednesday night midweek Bible study prayer time. And we'll have a special guest speaker with us tonight. Before I introduce him and turn the service over to him, let me introduce again Matt and Sarah, who are back with us. They are neighbors of Louise and Dom and have been with us for a couple of weeks. They were gone this past weekend, but this is the first time they've been able to be with us on Wednesday night. And so, Matt and Sarah, we want to welcome you guys to our Wednesday night service. You're also getting to know William back here, as he has been so faithful since moving to this area with the job transfer, and so good to have him back with us again as well. And so everybody else, you should know Keith is back with us tonight, still alive and kicking. And so after battling through COVID, and some of you may or may not know that, but he's well, he's back, he's well, right, Keith? So good to have Keith back with us. In fact, I'm going to ask Keith if he would stand here in just a moment and open us in prayer. And so at the end of our time tonight, after we hear from our missionary speaker, that we have. Then we'll take some prayer requests and just close out in prayer. So it'll be a little bit of a different service tonight. And so, but a couple things just mentioned before Keith opens us in prayer is to pray for Tim Beatty, I'm sorry, Keith. Pray for Tim Beatty as he's at home tonight, and as he had his knee surgery, and that went really well from what I understand, and I think he's got it propped up, and so pray that that will heal up quickly. And then also for Gloria Morrison, she had knee replacement surgery yesterday, and she will be in the hospital until tomorrow. I think they're going to let her go home tomorrow, and so pray for her as well. And then Mary Lou, I talked to Rolando and Mary Lou today. Mary Lou goes in tomorrow for her second round of her treatment. And so she's had one round and did okay with it. And so she goes in tomorrow for her second treatment. So continue to pray for her, Mary Lou, as she battles with stage 4 cancer. And we're praying for God to heal her. And so, Keith, why don't you stand, open us in prayer.
Tonight in the service, Lord, I do these requests. We think of Mary Lou, God, and just pray that you just have your hand upon her. Give her peace, Lord, and everything that she's going to do. Pray that you just be with her tonight, especially Miss Morrison, Tim's, Lord, we thank you for your report there. God, we're just thankful for our church body and for the salvation you've given us. So many things, Lord. Just be with us tonight.
Amen. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. Well, some of you may remember, I was trying to figure out when it was, but it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago. We had the Gibbons family with us as they were headed to raising support to go to England, to the UK, and start their ministry there as the Lord had called them there. And so they have been there now for almost 4 years, and they are home on a little bit of a furlough there. And I know that prayer request too is to pray for Danielle's mom, who lives in this area not too far from here and who is also battling with cancer. And so they're actually here primarily to be a support to her and encouragement to her through this time. And so I found out that Clay was going to be in the area and wanted him to kind of come tonight and give us an update on what the Lord is doing over in England in their ministry and through their family, and how the Lord has directed and settled them in there in their new ministry. And so I'm going to turn things over to Brother Clay. You come and share with us what God has laid on your heart. He's going to show a presentation and give us an update and then challenge us from God's Word tonight. So Clay, good to have you back here. And this is the first time you guys have seen our new building, right? That's right. So good to have you, man.
Well, good evening. It is a joy to be with you on the Wednesday evening, and a joy to be able to share what the Lord has been doing in our ministry, in our lives over in the UK. As Pastor Mike said, my name is Clay Gibbons, and my wife, Danielle, is there in the back. And we have 4 children. Eloise is 10. Emery, a boy, is 7. Esmond is 5, and then she's holding Edward, who is 3 months. Yes, they are all E's. Yes, it is confusing. And yes, it was intentional. And we are questioning whether or not that was the right choice, because when we say something, it never quite comes out right. But anyways, I'm thankful to be able to just update you a little bit and maybe inform you. You may or may not have been here when we presented our work to England. I think it was probably 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And how the Lord was calling us and what we had planned to do in the UK. And what we had planned to do is definitely not what happened. The Lord changed our plans sovereignly, reoriented us to do something else. And so I wanted to start off tonight in a very British way with a quiz, because that's something that they enjoy tremendously. And I thought maybe it just would be a good way to make sure everyone's awake and to see how much you guys know about England. So it's to be interactive. Just shoot your hand up. It's only 5 questions. There is no grade at the end. And I don't have any candy. I should have brought some. I'm sorry. But quick quiz here. How many countries are in the UK? Do we know? Oh, I got 3, 4, 3, 4. Oh, we are divided. All right, so we have 4. Yeah, it's 4. Can we count them? Wales, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. You got to be careful, okay? You got to be careful with that. Northern Ireland. So those are the 4 countries that make up the one country of the United Kingdom. So each of those 4 countries have what they call a devolved government. So each of them can make some kind of like the states. It can make some of their own rules and regulations and laws. But they are all, the central government is in Westminster and London. All right, question number 2. Famous wall in the north of England. Famous wall in the north of England. Yeah? Hey, well done. Hadrian's Wall. That's just a little bit of trivia. So the Emperor Hadrian, the Roman Emperor Hadrian, built the wall in the north of England to keep out the Scots way back when. Okay, largest royal palace still in use. This is not just in the UK, or it is located in the UK, but it is worldwide. Does anybody know what that one is? No? I hear Buckingham. Buckingham is not the right answer. That's her weekday house. Okay, so she has a weekend house. That is the one I'm looking for. Kensington? No. Windsor. Okay, so Windsor is just outside of London, and it's a very large castle or palace. That's where she spends her weekends and some of her holidays as well. You know that she's there if the flag is flying above the castle. Number 4, population of the UK. Have a guess. 100 million? A little bit too much. Higher. 60 is very close. 67 million. So if you think about it, that's the population of California and of New York and of North Carolina, all packed into an area a little bit bigger than North Carolina. So it's very, population density is pretty high. We live, here's a Britishism, cheek to jowl with one another. So we are very close, packed in together. And the highest density is in London, where we live and work. Fastest growing worldview in the UK. Okay. This is a little bit of a trick question. What was that? Humanism, atheism. Atheism and Islam are the 2 fastest growing worldviews in the UK. Here's just a couple of facts I'm going to give to you. We won't spend much on this. Only 28% of the UK confidently say that there is any type of God at all. It's only 28%. There are 5.3 million Christians, or people who identified, 5.3 million fewer people who identified as a Christian between the years 2001 to 2011. They do a census on 2001, they did another one in 2011, they just done another one, and I think the results are going to be surprising. Atheism, between 33 to 50%, depending on which poll you look at. These are people who just self-identify as being an atheist or an agnostic. Islam is greater than 5%. And just to think about that, when we have, as we have, been there, we have realized of how devout they are to their faith. On Fridays, you see them go to prayer, and you see all the men wearing their traditional outfits, and how they are not ashamed at all of that, of wearing their skull caps and their long tunics. And then you think about this, only less than 2% of the population attend any type of church weekly. There are other faiths that are also growing, Hinduism and Sikhism, especially where we're at. There's the largest Sikh population outside of Punjab, India, in West London, where we live. These faiths are growing, but Christianity is continually on the decline. So that's the statistical need. What we have seen, though, is that we have observed this need, that we have been there for almost 4 years, 3.5, a little bit more than 3.5 years. We have seen that it is largely a Christless culture that is completely secular. When they really struggle to talk about anything moral because they have no anchor. There's no absolute that they can appeal to because they have erased all the absolutes. The churches are closing. Danielle and I have seen churches close since we have been there. We have churches that we knew of that were good Bible preaching churches that have closed. We have seen other churches that have closed, and churches have closed and been turned into hotels and Airbnbs and nightclubs and mosques. Many of the churches in our area in West London, many of them are without pastors. I was trying to remember, there's about 7 Baptist churches in our little area. Not all of them would be good churches as far as believing the Bible and preaching the gospel. But more than half of them, most of them, don't have a pastor. Many of the churches that even if they do believe the gospel, they are sitting on it. There is no proclamation of the gospel. They're very quiet. They do not want to offend. They do not want to say that this is the truth and any other way is wrong. And so they're very quiet with it. And then even more churches are they have no recognition for Scripture. Scripture is not authoritative. It is a kind of antiquated book that has some good moral teachings, but as far as being God's word for us today and bearing God's authority, that's a foreign thought to them. That's for old times. It's not for now. So we have seen this need observed, and that because many times when I tell people that we're missionaries in England, I kind of get the head scratching. Why would you go there? Why wouldn't you go to some of these other places? Well, yes, the gospel's needed there as well, but it's surprising to think of how quickly the country has changed in the past 50 or 60 years and how secular it has become. So this is why we are in England, because there is a great need for the gospel to go back to England, for biblical churches to be planted or replanted, for pastors to be trained, for the gospel to continually go out. Because through all of these different ways, through immigration, through the liberalism of Christianity, the true biblical Christianity has collapsed, and it is in its last gasp. So this is the need. So where do we live? Here's our community. We live in West London, between these two places called Uxbridge and Hayes. So here's our map of the UK. The 4 countries. England is in the green, Wales in the red, Scotland in the yellow up at the top, and then Northern Ireland is a little bit in the orange. The rest of that is the Republic of Ireland. Remember, don't confuse the two. And then this is London. London is a city, 8 million people in the center, upwards of 12 to 15 million throughout this area. And then 20 million, before COVID at least, would come in and out of London every day. Huge city. We live all the way on the western part. So over here in the borough of Hillingdon. And so that borough is about 300,000 people. And it's near Heathrow. So if you guys have flown in to London, that's where Heathrow's at. And we're not far from that. Many of the parents for the children that go to the same school as our children work at Heathrow in the airport. It is a very diverse area. And this is Uxbridge here, in this picture. You can see my 2 boys there. It is at the end of the tube line. So if you get on the Metropolitan subway, the tube, you go follow it all the way to the end, you end up in Uxbridge. And that's where we're at there in the high street, the square. There we are, riding the tube. One of the big changes for us going over there is that most people don't have a car. And so public transport is the way of life. I grew up in Carthage, North Carolina, so just down the road here. And, cars, trucks, actually, are mandatory. You have to have one. And so it was a big shift for us learning to use public transport. We did get a car because having a family is just easier. We have to have one, which means that you have to pay the fees and deal with the traffic. But we do take the tube, and a lot of people take the tube, which makes ministry a little bit of a different feel because ministry is more local then. Most people would walk to church or maybe take a bus to church. If you have to drive 45 minutes, then they wouldn't consider that. That's too far. So ministry is very local. Most of the people in our church live within a mile radius of the church. So we can easily, I can walk to their home, or I can get on my bike and be to their home within about 10 minutes. So it gives you a little bit of a community feel. It's not quite the old England village that you may picture. It's nothing like that. But it has a leftover effect. Here's just a picture of the high street there. It is a very diverse area. I thought this was interesting because where we live closer to Hayes, but our children go to school in Uxbridge. In Hayes, there is literally just like this. You can't see it in this picture, but there is a mosque, a giant modern mosque, directly beside a Gurdwara, which is a Sikh temple. They're right beside each other. And then if you go about another 100 yards down the road, there is a Hindu temple. And then another 100 yards down the road, after that, there is a large Catholic church. And if you went a little bit further after that, there's another giant mosque. And the whole area is just very diverse. We have people from all over the world that have moved in to Hayes, and they have brought their religion with them. So many people from Punjab that there are Sikh, many people from Pakistan, from Iran, from Somalia that are Muslim, many people from other parts of India that are Hindu, and many of the national British people, the white British people, have moved away because they have not coped very well with the change of their community and their culture. So this is where we live, and this is represented in our church. The church, well, I'll talk about it in a moment, is very diverse. I think we counted 23 different nations that are represented. So here is just, I was out on a Friday, and I just took a picture saying, this is a good representation of what life is like here. Is there just after prayers had just finished, the Muslim prayers, and all these guys come out in their tunics, and I think you see some of the Sikh guys with their long beards, and it's just a very diverse area, which has some implications again for ministry, because when children go to school and their classmates are this, and maybe they're Christian, then who's to say that these people are wrong and that you are right? So what it has created is a tolerant culture, and a culture that is afraid of giving offense and standing up for absolute truth. So that's Hayes. Let's see. This is just one of the parks there. They do a good job in London with guarding the parks. There's a lot of green space. So even though you may be living in a matchbox, right down the road, there's a park where you can get out and stretch your legs and have some green space there. So our ministry, as I mentioned, we've been there for about 3.5 years, and our ministry plan is not what we did. About 2 weeks before we left, all of our plans changed, and we literally had to pick a spot to move because we didn't know where we were going, but we knew we had to go. And we ended up in West London, and about 6 months later, we started partnering with Salem Baptist Church. Salem Baptist Church is a small Baptist church. We have about 40 members. Before COVID, we had about 80 to 90 people attending. Now it's more like 50 to 60. And as I mentioned, very diverse. People from all over the world. People from Ghana, from Hong Kong, from the Netherlands, from India, many parts in India, America, and 1 or 2 English people as well. And so we have been here for 3 years, working alongside the senior pastor. His name is Pastor Bill. Let me see. Yeah, he's there in the picture. This is after COVID, so we have to speak behind a big glass screen. And so there's Pastor Bill. He is from Glasgow, a Glaswegian. He's quite a bit older than I am. He's been there at the church for about 6 years. And we came into the church, and it was a non-confessional church. So it didn't have a very clear, laid out doctrinal statement. And Pastor Bill and I are working on that. I'll more about that in a moment. So we work at Salem Baptist Church. And here is just a picture. There's my daughter Eloise and some friends of ours, members of the church from Sri Lanka there, and Pastor Bill preaching in his sandals, as he likes to do. We have a co-worker. She moved down from Wales to work alongside us at the church. Her name is Angela Baker. She's been in England doing missions work for 20 years. And so she's been a big asset to us there with my wife, Danielle. One of the big ministries that we enjoy is our midweek Bible club. Pastor Mike was telling me that you guys have maybe 30 or 40 kids that come to Awana. We have about 14 kids that come to our midweek Bible club, and it is probably, well, without question, it is my favorite ministry. This is the primary age children, so they go up to about age 12, and we play games, and then we go through, we use Kids for Truth, a catechism-style teaching, where we're just teaching them basic doctrine. And we sing songs, and we play games. And then we have holiday Bible clubs. So same thing as Vacation Bible School. The school system there is kind of a year-round system. So at different times during the year, they have a week off. And the parents still have to go to work. And so we might do a Bible club during that week. So this is one of them. Here's another one where we just have them in for a day or a couple of days, and we play games and we do Bible teaching with them. And so we have 14 young people that come to this, and it's a lot of fun. And they are memorizing their verses, they're memorizing their questions and answers, and it's so refreshing to see that we can reach them while they're young, before they get indoctrinated with some of these secular ideas as they get older, to reach them while they're young. And so this is the pastor's wife, Miss Marie. She helps us along with that ministry. And here I am running some of the games inside of our church. And then this is probably my favorite vacation Bible school that we did, Holiday Bible Club. I don't know if you can see what's going on there, but we did a Pinewood Derby. We had them all week. Each day they would come in and they'd work a little bit on their car. And so they had to cut it out. They had to draw it. We had to cut it out. We had to sand it and paint it. And then on Saturday, we had the race. And we had 35 kids that week, and every one of them came back for the race with their parents. And it was a tremendous outreach. It was right before COVID. And all their parents came, and we were able to give them the gospel, and we really had some momentum going with this ministry. Some of the kids from this joined our Bible club. It was a great outreach for the gospel there. We also have our teens. That was Thursday nights that we do the Bible club, and then Friday nights we do our teenagers. So same kind of idea, except for much bigger questions. As they are working through all of the things that they are being taught in school, they come to me and they say, Mr. Clay, what does the Bible say about whatever? And then we spend 30 minutes talking about that. And we do, right now, I left them with a devotional study that they're going through for 6 weeks. So when I get back, we can talk through that. And just trying to get them to learn to read their Bible and to apply it for themselves. And we have a lot of fun. We do games as well on Friday nights. And we took them camping. Most of the kids in London are very regional. That's just it. They don't travel outside of their little area. And so we were able to take them to a Christian camp in Wales, and it was mind-blowing for them. To go outside of the sounds, they were afraid of the quiet. To go outside of the lights and the sirens of London to get to this was a big shock for them. Get them outside of their comfort zone a little bit, and they loved it. It was a great time. Past 2 years, though, it has been canceled again because of COVID. But there we are. We took, I think, 7 kids to camp with us that year. Took them hiking in Wales. Very cold, very wet, even in July and August. And then probably the biggest part of my ministry is through preaching. So I share about half the preaching load with Pastor Bill, sometimes much more than that. He recently had hip replacement surgery, and so I did all the preaching through a very important time for our church. Of course, with COVID and everything, we are on YouTube, so you can look us up there. Subscribe if you want. But one thing that came across us that we were not expecting was a bit of construction. We found in November of 2019, after the service, there was a lady came to me and told me that her high heel shoe had gone through the floor. I said, that's not good. We can't have that. And so we had to do some exploration, seeing what was going on. We found out that the church, the floor was collapsing in on itself, and there was a void, like a crawl space of about 3 or 4 feet underneath. And it started a huge refurbishment project for us, where we had to remove everything from like the sanctuary area and all the way down to the earth, to the dirt, which we covered up with some plastic there, and then put it back. So here we are. I led them through this project. I have a little bit of experience in this industry, so I kind of managed it as we went through. It was very successful. It went really well. The Lord really blessed. We did it through COVID. So since so many of them were on furlough, meaning that they weren't working, they had free time, so they came down to the church, and we did a lot of it, just some of the church members, so that helped keep the costs down. There's me and my son Emery putting up some cladding there. But what it revealed to us was there was a physical problem that paralleled the spiritual problem for our church. The spiritual foundations of the church, this church that we had been working with, which I think is very representative of all churches, many of the churches, I can't use absolutes, many of the churches in the UK, is that these spiritual foundations that are so core and so important have been neglected, and that they are crumbling. They are at imminent risk of collapse. And just like that floor, the engineer came in and looked at it and said, you cannot meet in here because it could give way at any point. The church spiritually has neglected its spiritual foundations. The basic teachings of what it means to be a Christian. What do we believe about our Bible? What do we believe about Jesus? What do we believe about salvation? What do we believe about the church? These things, when we asked different people in our church, we were getting very different answers, if they could give any answer. And so Pastor Bill and I began a kind of a redrafting process for our statement of faith, that we are taking, almost like a church plant, we are taking the church all the way through what it is, what our church believes, section by section, doctrine by doctrine. And it was not very welcomed at the beginning. Some of the people have been there for 70 years, and they did not want to see any of this. And so we got some pushback from it. But we just finished the first section, and that's the one that I taught through on what do we believe about our Bible. And we had our church vote on the section on what we believed about our Bible. And it was unanimous. The church agreed fully on what we presented, which was a statement that I think we would all agree to. But this is what we have going forward. Is we have continuing this process when we go back. We're going to move on to the next section. What do we believe about God? And then what do we believe about Jesus? So this whole redrafting of the statement of faith is core. It's so important to the life of our church, to the continuing ministry of our church, so that when I'm off the scene in a few years or however long the Lord keeps me there, the church stays on the right track. So then here's just a few pictures of home life. I know that some of you are interested in that. So we lived in a bungalow, a small bungalow, about 870 square feet. So we were pushed in tight there. We had a nice back garden. There's me trying to promote some Americana in the back garden playing baseball with my son Emery. Different things. This was during lockdown, and we couldn't go anywhere. We had put in a slack line for the kids to play in the back garden. There they are, enjoying some ice cream. This is just after baby Eddie was born. And the school. The children attend a Church of England school. So this is a government-funded Christian kind of school. And so they go there, and my wife Danielle works there. I serve as a governor there, which is kind of like somebody on the school board. And it's been a good fit for us, for the children for us to understand how the culture works in the UK. It all revolves around the school system. They're very proud of that, and everything is scheduled. If the kids are in school or if they're not in school, everything is based upon that. The whole nation operates on the same schedule. And we do a fair amount of exploring when we have time, trying to get out of the busyness of where we live in West London, or actually this is Central London here, the Transport Museum, but sometimes we try and get out to the countryside and take some hikes and walks and things. Let me just go over this plan, and then I want to see if you guys have any questions for me or maybe for Danielle about our life and ministry there. What we want to do when we go back at the end of August, we're only here for a few weeks, but when we go back, we want to continue this doctrinal restructuring program that I've been talking about, taking the church through this. We think it could last another year or year and a half while we work through this. We want to continue the children and the youth work. Particularly, we want to do that and equip some people to help us, because right now I lead both of them. And our co-worker helps me with the teenagers. Danielle helps me with the Bible club. We want to see some of the church members take responsibility and ownership for that, so that when we step away, that it can continue. We want to stop the leaks. Because I think just like in the U.S., it's not very different, that it seems like there's a certain age that the children just kind of fall away. And there's maybe between like 16 to 35 or so, there are very few people in our church that are in that age bracket. And so we want to try, and as much as we can, through the Lord's grace, to just see them saved and see them matured and discipled while they're young. We want to develop community evangelism. You say, well, why aren't you doing that already? That's a good question. It's mostly our evangelism has happened inside of our church so far, because there have been church attenders and church members that were not believers. And so most of our ministry have been to the people inside the church. We want to move beyond that and help our people look outwards to the community to help reach them with the gospel. And then finally, develop or help with ministry training. There's a young man that recently, in the past few months, came and told me that he feels like the Lord is calling him towards ministry. And we want to help him pursue that. So that's a real quick overview of what's been happening for us the past 3.5 years. But I'd love to hear from you. Maybe you have some questions about, it doesn't matter, whatever. Danielle snuck out, but I think she can come back if you guys have a question for her about life, about ministry, about which football team I support, or anything else. Yes, ma'am. So I would like to, personally, I have been pursuing a biblical counseling certificate. I want to open it up, just the front doors, to let anybody come in to work through biblical counseling. Because the church is situated right on a bus stop. There are always people outside the church doors. I mean, the bus stop is from here to the back wall, away from the church front doors. And when we did have the church doors open, people walked in all the time. All types of people. Muslims came in and asked questions. And so that's the first thing I want to be able to do, is after we get past some of these COVID restrictions and whatever, we want to be able to open that up, have tea and coffee, let them come in, and I just be able to talk to them. And mental health is big there, and being able to address some of these things that are called mental health but are really rooted in spiritual issues, and to work with them in that way. There are different other things that we would like to do. We'd like to do more outreach, possibly some door-to-door things. We would like to do more with the Bible clubs again, being able to advertise for that and have children come to that as well. We would also like to run a Christianity Explored course. That's just kind of a course for anybody interested in Christianity. Because one of the big advantages that we have to ministry there is that we fit right in. Not many missionaries can say that. But because nobody is from there, then it's fine. We're just another immigrant like everybody else. And so immigrants by nature, when they come in, they are open and they're searching because their whole world has been turned upside down. They're ready to try new things. They're ready to branch out a little bit. And so if you can engage them while they're asking some of those questions, it's a prime opportunity for the gospel. And so Christianity Explored is a good opportunity for that. Good question. Yes, sir.
Are you facing any political pressure on what you can and can't say from pulpit?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so there have been several instances of people being indicted or arrested or whatever for hate speech when it comes to homosexuality or whatever. Right at the beginning, that very first slide I showed you with my boys at the end of the tube line, that's like I said, it's a high street. It's kind of city center or town center. There's a man that I know that gets up and he speaks there usually on Friday, and he was arrested just a few weeks ago for preaching from that spot. So yes, there is, and it's only growing. And it's not just people outside the church. It's some churches that are completely liberal are putting pressure on other churches to stop that, to stop any type of biblical preaching. Yeah, good question. Yes, ma'am.
You had mentioned maybe down the road when you would need to step away. Are you talking about maybe going to another church down the road to do the same thing to help, or are you looking down the road your long-term plan?
Yeah, I want to make plans, but the Lord just, He puts His plans, which are better. But our plan is to, at some point, move into a senior pastorate position to be able to lead a church. But right now, there's so much work that needs to be done at Salem that our plan is for the next few years to at least be there. Pastor Bill is getting a little bit older, and so he may be looking at retirement at some point. But it would be better, what we're praying is that this other young man, that we could see him trained up so that maybe he could step into that position instead of them looking towards me for it. Okay, yes, sir.
How many churches would you say that are within close enough range to you that you could have fellowship with them, doctrinally sound?
Depends on where you're going to draw the lines at for separation, but maybe one. Yeah, maybe one. And,
Clay,
yes, sir.
I forgot to tell you this, but people are watching from home.
Okay.
They ask you a question, repeat the question so these
sorry.
guys know.
Yeah, good.
Just have to think about that.
All right. So the question was, how many churches within my area could I fellowship with doctrinally? And I think maybe one. There's a church that some of the children at the school also go to that I've met with. I visited there. I know the pastor. And I think I could fellowship with him. His health has not been very well, so I haven't seen him very much, but just that one. The other churches, I could not. No. Yes, ma'am.
Did I hear you say that the country revolves around the school system?
Yes.
And if so, is your ministry also do the same as far as going towards the children?
Yeah, so the question was about the country revolving around school systems, so does our ministry cater to that? Yes, it does, because there's really only two options for school. There's the school system or homeschooling, and I don't know of any British family, even though that they're strong born-again Christians, that are homeschooling. Pretty much everybody is in the school system and trying to be a light in the school system. And so the ministry has to, we make plans around that on when they go to school. Can we do something on a weekday evening? Are the parents going to come to that? And can we do something in the schools, which being a governor has allowed me to go, and I've been able to preach twice in these past couple months in our school to the children there. So yes, a lot of it works around the school system. Yeah, good question. Yes, sir.
Is there a reason, I'm not sure there's probably a lot of reasons, but is there a major reason that you see the stagnation of Christianity in Britain? Like one of your earlier slides was referring that actually like some, almost like some decreasing numbers.
So the question was, is there one big reason that we have seen a stagnation and decrease in Christianity? There are a lot of reasons. The world wars did not help. They lost 2 generations of men through that. But the biggest reason is the lack of expository preaching. That's my personal opinion, is that a lot of the preaching is just, well, it's not expository preaching. It's not clearly rooting the authority of what you're saying in the Scriptures. Yes, Mr. Mitzi.
Is there local training available for like a guy who wants to be a pastor? Is there any at all?
Yes, there is. There's Martin Lloyd-Jones, his seminary is good. I took a class there just to kind of see what it was like. And we would feel fairly comfortable with it. But I would want to do things just a little bit differently for like this young man. That's been something that we've thought about. But it's not flexible. You got to commit completely to it. You can't work a job alongside of it. So it makes it difficult for somebody who's maybe a little bit older and has to support himself through it. But they would agree with us 95%. Yeah. They would not be as strong on expository preaching, ironically enough, as like what I would want them to be. Yes, Pastor Mike.
The guy that you are working with right now,
Yeah.
Is he a missionary supported by American money, or is he supported by the church?
The question was the pastor that I'm working with right now, is he supported as a missionary? No. No, he is supported by our church. Yeah, so he's a paid pastor. Another reason why I would not want to take that position, because I'd be taking money away from a national British that could step into that role. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask you, how do you and your wife think they'll actually get poured into and get your growth from that, like the support and encouragement that you may not get in one day?
Well, we really enjoy working alongside the pastor and his wife, Pastor Bill and Marie. I'm so thankful to have a team to work alongside them. And Angela, our co-worker. So that's key. And then sermon audio. I listen to a lot of preaching and a lot of teaching. She does the same. You know, we try and feed ourselves that way on top of our own Bible reading and prayer. Yeah. But I don't see that we would have made it unless the Lord had put us inside of that team. I think we could have easily gotten frustrated and discouraged and called it quits 2 years in. So we're very thankful for that. Okay. Any other questions? No? Let me just challenge you just for a moment here from the Word. Let's turn to Luke chapter 5. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest in missions. It's hard. It's not all glamour. It's not what we thought it would be. But we're thankful to be used of the Lord in that way. And if you want to stay in touch with us, out there I have our prayer cards on the table to the left when you go out. On the back of it is my email address. It's gibbons@gfamissions.org. If you want to be put on our mailing list, just drop me an email. I'll add you. And we send out monthly or bi-monthly updates on what's going on there. So thank you again. Luke chapter 5. I won't take much time here. I just want to talk to you for a moment about the call of a disciple. This is a passage that the Lord has been using in my life, and used in my life, I think, more before I left towards missions, when I was considering missions, and then even more so as we were there, and as I've been reflecting on it while we've been back. Luke chapter 5 is the call of Peter to be a disciple. It says, "Now it happened," verse 1, "that while the crowd was pressing around him and listening to the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. So just to set the scene for us for a moment, Jesus is at the beginning of his ministry. He's been preaching, he's been teaching. He's a mini celebrity in the Galilee region, northern Israel. And everybody wants to hear him. Everybody wants to touch him. Everybody wants to see what he's going to do. And so he is preaching early in the morning, as we'll see in a moment, on the lake of Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee. And the people want to get close to him. They're pressing in on him. They're pushing him into the water. You can see, you just picture it. All these people wanting to touch Jesus, and he's ankle deep. Now he's knee deep in the water as they try to get close to him. And verse 2, and he saw 2 boats lying at the edge of the lake, but the fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put a little way out from the land. And he sat down and he began teaching the people from the boat. So we see Jesus, he's being pressed in. He looks over to the side here, and he sees 2 boats, and he sees the men, which is going to be Peter and James and John and Peter's brother Andrew, that are mending their nets, cleaning their nets. They'd just been fishing. As we find out, they've been fishing all night, and now they're trying to get ready for the next night's fishing. So they have to mend these nets. They got to clean out all the fish, or it could be crustaceans or the unclean fish that may be in the nets, or maybe the nets have been torn. They have to set them just right so they can dry, so that they're ready for the fishing. And Jesus sees them, and he says to Simon Peter, let me have your boat. And so he steps in Peter's boat, and Peter pushes him off from shore, and he starts to preach and teach the people from the boat. This is a sovereign setup. Jesus, this is not leaving anything to chance here. It is not by accident that Peter was there, that Andrew and James and John were there. It is not by accident that they had just had a night where they didn't catch a thing. It's not by accident that it was right there in the morning while they were within earshot and they could hear what Jesus was saying. Jesus is sovereign over this, and he is orchestrating that call. Then look at what it says in verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." So there's Jesus. The Holy Spirit does not give us what he says in his preaching and teaching this time. He gives us what happens right after. Jesus turns to Peter and says, "Let's go out deep, and we're going to let down your nets for a catch." You can listen to Simon's reaction in verse 5. Simon answered and said, "Master, we worked hard all night and caught nothing, but I will do as you say and let down the nets." There's a little bit of doubt in Peter's response. Do you see that? There's a little bit of a question. Okay, Jesus, I've been listening to you preach and teach. I know that you're a good teacher, and I've heard that you're a carpenter, but you're not a fisherman. Leave the fishing to me. And you don't fish in the middle of the day for this type of fish with this net. You don't fish out in the deep. This is not how we do things. You're going to make a mockery of yourself, Jesus. All these people are watching. You've just been preaching to them. Now they're watching to see what's going to happen next. And you're putting us out in a place where we're not going to catch any fish. You can feel a little bit of that doubt in Peter's response as Jesus asks him to do something that's a little bit surprising. But there's also faith in Peter's response. He says, "But I will do as you say and let down the nets." So he obeys. He obeys the master's command here. In verse 6, when he had done this, they enclosed a great quantity of fish, and their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat for them to come and to help them. And they came and they filled both of the boats so that they began to sink. So Peter, he obeys, and he's the biggest catch of his life. He's pulling his net in, and he's amazed at what he's bringing in. And he calls to Andrew and to James and John, "Get over here and help me." They're putting the fish in the boat. The boats are starting to be swamped. And then look at what happens in verse 8. But when Simon Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' feet, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Peter just realized what was going on. He realized who he was and who he was in the presence of. He realized that this man in the boat with him was not just a prophet, but that this man in the boat was the Lord of all things, that he was the Lord of men and the Lord of the sea and the Lord of the fish and the Lord of man's daily work. And he realizes that he is in the presence of God. And like all the other biblical writers, when they have a true encounter with God, they fall on their face in humility before him, because they're aware of the second thing, of their utter sinfulness, and that there's nothing worthy in him. There's nothing worthy in me. There's everything of worth in Jesus. And Peter falls before him. And at that moment, if you think about it, Jesus was the one fishing. And he's the one who, right then, he caught what he was fishing for. You can hear the drag going out on his reel, whizz, as Peter is hooked. Because now he has his disciple. He has the man that he came to get that morning. Because now he has somebody that he can use, not because of capability, but because of humility. Jesus could have had a fishing tournament out there. If he wanted to select the best fishermen in order to be one of his disciples, he could have had the first annual bass tournament of the Sea of Galilee and taken the winner. But that's not what happened. He orchestrated it, all of this, to call a disciple. And it was humility that was required. Verse 9 says, "For amazement had seized him and all his companions," not just Peter, but his other disciples with him, "because of the catch of fish which they had taken. And so were also James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon," here's the call of discipleship. He says, "Do not fear. From now on, you will be catching men." As Peter humbles himself, Jesus commands him with what he's going to do. He says, "Do not fear, for now you will be catching men." When you become a follower of me, when you become a follower of Jesus, Jesus makes you a catcher of men, a fisher of men. You begin to catch what Jesus wants you to catch. And that needs to be increasing. That's what Peter's life was going to be all about. If we thought about this further, in John chapter 21, we have a very similar account. Some commentators think that actually the biblical writers were confused and that they recorded the same account twice. Of course, that's foolishness. That's not what happened. When Jesus recommissions Peter, there's a great catch of fish, 153 fish. When Peter is out fishing again all night, didn't catch a thing, Jesus is on the shore, says, "Peter, put your net on the other side of the boat," and caught 153 fish. Jesus is illustrating what Peter is going to do spiritually. Like Peter caught a great catch of fish physically, he is now going to go and catch a great catch of men spiritually. And that's exactly what happens in Acts chapter 2 and in other passages in Acts as he preaches the gospel and he brings men to Jesus. Jesus is telling Peter at this moment that the most important thing in your life is going to be following me and loving people. You're going to follow Jesus and you're going to love and value people. And as you increase in your love of Jesus and your love of people, you're going to decrease in your love of verse 11, things. Look at what it says. "When they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him." That really gets me there. Because you think about that, great catch of fish, weeks worth of work maybe, a month's worth of work that he just brought in. He got it to the shore, then he quickly unloaded it. He called the boys to help him. He ran into town, he sold it. He put the money in his pocket just as a backup plan in case the following Jesus didn't work out. And then he went and followed Jesus. No. He left everything. All of that money, all of his belongings, all of the comfort of having a steady job and an income and knowing where you're going to sleep at night, all of those things that we value so much, Peter left it, and in faith he followed Jesus and became a fisher of men. the command of discipleship, to love Jesus and to love people, to follow Jesus and to continually be bringing people to Jesus, to be casting your gospel net and to be bringing people to him. If I were to ask you this evening, if we brought in your nets today, what are you bringing in? What are you catching? What are you valuing? What are you putting your affections and your hope in? Is it people? Or like me, do you so easily start to value all of these other things that we should be leaving behind in order to follow Jesus? Thank you for your good attention. My wife and I will be around afterwards. I'd love to speak with each of you. And you can say hello to the children. Try to remember their names. But and please sign up for our newsletter if you are interested in that. Thank you very much, Pastor Mike.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Brother Clay, for that challenge. Just reminding us to be a follower of Christ is to become a catcher of men, right? Something that we've been emphasizing even in the last 2 weeks in my mini sermon on how to be an effective soul winner. And I think Clay reminded us again of how distracted we all are. And to just think about dropping everything when you really understand what's really important. And we would be willing to do that, and we should be willing to do that. And so, great challenge from the Word of God. I appreciate what he said about God's call and God's using of Peter was not because of his capability, but was because of his humility. And so, God uses humble people that are surrendered to him. And so, Clay, we're excited about what God's doing in your ministry there. And it's good to have him back to give us an update, and good to hear how God's working all around the world. Amen. And so appreciate him being here tonight. And so before we dismiss, I do want to get someone to close in prayer here in just a moment. And but before we do that, I want to take a few prayer requests. And so Johnny, I'll ask you if you'll close us in prayer here in just a moment. But other prayer requests that you guys have, I mentioned Mary Lou, who's going in for